So the times they are changing. 60 years ago, Bob wrote this. 60 years ago, so it could be like listed heritage already. It has the age. But I think as we talk about changing time, we should also look at the sign of the time, perhaps. This is kind of just some clippings that I collected in the past period on an increasing set of voices demanding a complete stop on demolition of buildings. Not because of historical cultural values, but simply out of the sustainability argument. Stop demolitions because of embedded grey energy, carbon dioxide, embedded materials. It gets very close, Stephen, to your argument. And I think when you look at that and you take into consideration that we've been building really a lot of buildings in the past 150 years, which are all more or less structurally sound and technically somewhere okay, I think we're confronted with a huge question to architecture. I mean, what are we as architects going to do with that massive production? So time, in a sense of its built output, I think becomes substantial to architecture. So it's not any more contextual, it is architecture perhaps itself in the future. Time. Napoleon Bonaparte visited Den Helder, a very small town up north in the Netherlands, in 1811, on October 15. And with his planned invasion in Russia only 8 months later, he was very afraid of the English attacking him in the back, so he nicknamed this small town the Gibraltar of the North and ordered for its fortifications. Jan Blanken was to build it, and it were 3 fortresses and a shipyard, a naval dock. And by 1922, the first phases were finished. That was 7 years after his defeat at Waterloo, so time of construction and kind of time of Napoleon didn't match each other. The docks were finished under the rule of King William I, hence its name Willemsoord, King Willem, and it remained a naval shipyard for 175 years, and in the late 1990s, the Navy finally left. And what you see here, that's the pointer, that's this kind of ring of original buildings that Jan Blanke built. There's a wet dock and there's this kind of dry docks around. This diagonal dock you will see later as you will see this shed, which was a shed designed to build masts for ships. So it's basically 4 very long bays where they could kind of assemble and work on the mast of the building. When the Navy left, the town could kind of reoccupy this site. And it's kind of very interesting because the history of the town is, of course, very much intertwined with this kind of naval dock and naval yard. Most of the people working there, but yet completely separated from the urban tissue. And with this kind of the Navy leaving and the city taking over, there is this gradual project of the city taking over, bringing, of course, kind of bars and restaurants, but also building a theater in here. And when we arrived on it, it was partly still in use. It will partly remain in use. So this is a clipper being in this kind of diagonal dock. This is a small, late post-war concrete simple structure, a tropentry building, and the shed for the masters are in the back. The city very bravely decided that the needed town hall or city hall would move to the shipyard. So they would take the actual center of civilization out of the town center and place it in a Navy yard. This was like the commission, it was the competition that we were up to. And it's kind of very interesting because this whole history of use is still there. This is the low sheds of the mast and the small Coventry building in the back. And actually what we propose is to utilize both those buildings one as a kind of one-floor representational space, having a council room, a room to marry, meeting rooms, desks where you could get your passport, all those kind of things. And the other building as really a kind of utility building, a small office building for the municipal organization. And also really imagining the people from the city using that public space, that kind of very free space around our buildings as a kind of continuous space, so they would walk from one building to the other. So this is a competition scheme that we handed in by the time. The buildings were pretty much straightforward, very profound buildings. They have numbers. So this is building 72. Post-war construction, very simple concrete construction, brick infill, simple windows in it. And when we first visited it, it was just in use, you know. In this case, the masts of the clipper were there, being painted. And no installations, no facilities, uninsulated. And we were very interested in the building in the sense of not so much the light or perhaps the walls, but what interested us most was, let's say, this construction, this idea of permanence of a very simple concrete construction. So we freed the building from walls, from interior use, from the facade, and set out to make it an office building. So we actually radically reused that concrete construction, repaired it where necessary, left it untreated where we could. It's kind of very straightforward way of dealing with it. And we filled it in with a new facade. It's a metal facade, which also kind of fits with this idea of a shipyard where metalworks were very present. It's a simple layout with offices around the facade, overlooking this wonderful Willemsoord. And we introduce a new void space in the middle, and between them there's this ring of staircases, meeting rooms, locker rooms, toilets, facilities. Kind of interestingly, how that structure also really became like the image of the building itself. So this is this void space in the middle with the kind of surroundings of the facilities. So we thought to really do them in wood as a kind of resembling also these ship interiors, which were often kind of crafted in very beautiful wooden interiors. And the rest of it very straightforward. I mean, the biggest task was this one with existing buildings, you know. It's like open heart surgery what you're looking at, you know. It's blue and red blood veins kind of, but you have to fix the whole thing in. And we really wanted to keep all the structure visible. So all the installations are on top of the floor. There's a computer floor on top of that, so we could leave all the ceilings open. It's kind of simple thoughts, radical thoughts, but these kind of buildings really ask for that, just to have an office space that overlooks a yard, but still has like this concrete construction on top of it. There's a lot of thinking that goes into that. There's a lot of design that goes into that. A lot of design being completely invisible, just to have like a nice office space. The other building, that's the interior again of it, with the light coming down and municipal organization being able to function over 3 floors. The other building was a listed monument because it was part of the original structure. It had a beautiful wooden post and beam construction, partly rotten, partly in okay condition. But most problematic of it is that all the people that would work on the shipyard and leave the shipyard were allowed with chalk to write their name on the beams. So we were confronted with a building with kind of text on the beams, and we couldn't touch the beams because the moment we would touch it, those names would disappear. So it's a very strange situation. We had to repair some parts. Yes, there were some small animals doing dirty things in the wood, so it was quite a complicated thing to keep it. But I think most complicated about it was we had to fill this fantastic space with rooms. We had to divide it up in rooms, which in itself was a very difficult task, typologically. Outside walls, in brickwork, and since the wooden construction was straight to the brickwork, we couldn't insulate the facades, interestingly enough. But since it being a very big hall, the influence on those facades on the internal climatization of the buildings were relatively small, so we resolved it by insulating the roof and insulating the floor, and having some additional heating along the walls, and with that we would keep that original situation. The layout is one of 4 parallel bays. We decided to keep one open as a kind of public space that you could enter from both sides. On the right-hand side you would find desks where you would change your passport or register your child. And on the left hand, in the middle, there is the council room, meeting rooms around. To the top there's a small cafeteria, and to the bottom there's a wedding room and a bigger meeting room for commissional meetings. Quite a simple layout that kind of fitted within that structure of the space. And there was one corner where there was this kind of small shed built into that bigger structure, with windows, with wood, with a color, with texture, with rhythm. And for us, that kind of very small house of the probably supervisor, the only heated room in that entire building, somehow gave us the clue how we could handle those kind of things, how we could build walls and utilize also those walls to bring in ventilation, electricity, have all the acoustics organized from those walls. So we designed actually a wall pattern that could have these kind of things in them, and that would work as a kind of backdrop to that structure. So that's how it worked out. Structure standing, new floor, and then these new walls behind it with windows. And of course there's this kind of building an ambience through that system by the use of color. So this is kind of very neutral. It's a beautiful color called Pompeian ash. It comes also with beautiful names, but it's this kind of green-gray color that has this kind of naval feeling to it, that also brought this kind of naval feeling to that building, to its interior. Here you see all those names on the beams. A small reception desk in the middle of that big hall where you enter. Looking the cross direction towards the cafeteria. Just kind of exposing the beauty of that structure. That's basically, it was like as found, a given, you just work with. It's an incredible joy in reusing those buildings as the kind of things that get handed to you. And it just requires a certain sense of sensitivity to play with them. Blue for a council room. It immediately kind of addresses it, but also plays, of course, with kind of naval associations in terms of colors. Of course, like a wedding room gets like a more romantic color, but it works. And it's the very same wall system. It's just changing the color, changes the ambience of the room, changes its program and its function. Meeting room. Leaving the walls exposed, leaving the roof exposed. So, 2 buildings, one being a monument, one being we could have taken it down. Changing times. Changing times. Changing times force us to reflect on the role of architects in the reuse of our built environment. I think the dominant historical cultural argument for preservation is going to be replaced by a sustainability argument of reuse. And the whole idea of originality of buildings will also kind of being questioned in that process. It's a kind of radical reuse that we're talking about. I think we must rethink the social cultural continuity as part of a sustainability future, of a sustainable future. And we must rethink within that our position of architects. It challenged the self-image as sole creators of the new. We're not talking about the new anymore as architects, and it really demands a different attitude as an architect to deal with existing buildings and to play with what you find and what architects before you invented, designed and built also on existing buildings. It will challenge our methods, it will challenge our standards, and it will challenge the structure in design that have been determined in the past century by new construction. So the times, they are changing, and the times are very exciting. Thank you very much.